What a powerful journey, a powerful conversation into the heart of Africa's creative industries. Please, one more round of applause for our panelists. Their insights illustrate not just the continent's cultural richness, but also the undeniable economic force that African creativity has become on the global stage, as you heard. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying Unstoppable Africa 2025, why not partner with us to make 2026 even more impactful? How do you do that, you ask? Check out that QR code on the screen. Scan it, share your details, and then we'll be in touch so that you can also be part of this movement, the Unstoppable Africa movement. We'd really, really love your input and your partnership as we make Africa unstoppable. Moving on, and we continue our creative session with fashion. Fashion is what? It is culture, it is identity, and it is arts. And it is a $2.5 trillion global industry. Africa's share, however, of that market is currently just over 1%. But that is about to change, ladies and gentlemen. So, we have a game-changing moment right now. We're here to launch the GABI Women Fashion Leaders Platform, an initiative set to supercharge women-led fashion businesses from Africa to the world. And to launch the GABI Women's Fashion Leaders Platform, please join me in welcoming to the stage Ms. Kibonen Fee, founder and CEO of Kibonen New York LLC, Ms. Iona Marquis, Creative Director of Kiko Romeo, in a conversation moderated by Helen Abao, COO of Atelier Jolie. Helen Abao, please join us.
Good afternoon. Evening, actually, at this point. So today we're here to celebrate creativity, but also to focus on how women are driving sustainable fashion and cross-regional trade across the global south. Africa's fashion industry is full of talent and vision, but what we know from every other market, including the US, is that creativity alone doesn't scale. Growth requires capital, partnerships, and an investment in infrastructure. I'm honored to be joined by these two powerhouses. So let's get right into it. For Iona, let's discuss slow fashion and trade. So Kiko Romeo has pioneered slow fashion in East Africa. How do you see circular fashion and artisanal-led production meeting new opportunities for cross-border trade?
Well, I think it's basically been happening for so long, but just in a very informal way. So it's now
Sorry, can we keep the noise in the back down? Thank you.
It's about how do we formalize it? How do we look and build these structures that can really support our different sort of artisanal-led systems? If you look at the work that we do, for example, we use fabrics that are made across the continent, but then the end product is all made in Nairobi. So it's really looking at how we can have more cross-border collaboration between sort of different artisans, different designers, different platforms such as Lagos Fashion Week, just looking at how to bridge these different creative platforms, because this is how we are really going to transform the trade. The creative industries are really the frontier of trade. Before you even go to a meeting to sort of seal an agricultural deal, on your way there, you'll be listening to a song, you'll be wearing different designers. These are the first, as you said earlier, we are the strong power. The creative industries are where it's at.
Love that. And I love how you're linking, yes. Meanwhile, I'm distracted because I know what I want from this runway. Okay. So the next question is for Kibonen. Let's discuss overcoming trade and supply barriers. So you've successfully taken African-inspired design into international markets. By the way, I first met her at Atelier Jolie. And what strategies have worked best for you in overcoming trade and supply chain barriers?
That's a good one. Thank you so much for that question. For me, I started by localizing production hubs. So in Cameroon, I successfully set up and run over 4 manufacturing hubs where my garments were produced locally. The second thing I did was kind of really take advantage of the digital sphere and distributing my products through my website, for instance, optimizing my website, Meta ads, Google ads, but above all, ensuring that my products can get to the end users without much movement. And the third thing I was fortunate to do was leaning on financial institutions like what we have with Afrexim Bank and Canex for financing or financial support. So for me, those techniques helped me be able to scale in what I'm doing and ensure that my products can get to the end users without too much barriers.
I think this brings us to a very important question, and this is for both of you, is what are the challenges in Africa, specifically, in terms of raising capital for women-led businesses, specifically fashion, right? I'd love both of your input on this.
I think there's often too much of a focus on the macro when it's the micro that we really need to look at. As we said before, the artisans, the cottage industries. If we can shift the focus to actually targeting these specific individuals, that's when we're really going to see the true economic change. We're going to see the sort of the leveling up of all these different businesses, of actual sort of tangible and equitable change. I think that too often we look at sort of investing in huge infrastructure when we don't need to do that. We can start at the grassroots, and from that we can really build sustainable change.
Sorry, and you're bringing up a good point, which is there are these strange expectations about what Africa needs. And I think when people put these expectations on a continent or a country, right, that they're not familiar with, it's just, first of all, it's unproductive. And with the worst thing that can happen to capital is that it's not productive capital, right? So it's important to work closely with the designers and from the native. Please.
So one of the challenges, I've experienced in raising capital to be able to scale on the continent, first of all, a lot of people do not consider the creative industries as an investable industry. So it limits your ability to create because at the same time you're creative, at that same time you have to be a business person. So for a long time, African creatives have focused on being creative, but they've had barely any support from the other ecosystem that comes together to make the industry complete. For some time, I thought to Africans, being a creative or being in the creative space just meant creating. But we forget that there's an entire infrastructure that comes behind a creative. So a creative person needs a business manager, needs an accountant, needs a marketing person. But we started creativity first from passion and natural talent. So we were just focused on creating. So we were not really even like trying to be like this super big industries. But then the demand forced us to scale, right? Because what you did in your little corner, like you just loved it, now everybody loves it and wants it because it's on social media, for instance, and it's going viral. But then how do you put everything together? So banks, for instance, never found our industry sexy enough to invest in. We were always considered informal. Till this point, we are still considered informal. We are still considered not serious. I don't even know how many parents sitting in here are comfortable with their kids being creatives. At some point, everybody thinks creatives are not serious. Yes, we might appear not serious, but that's because you cannot go to start a bank as a banker and not have your complete infrastructure, for instance. You would have your legal person sitting there. You would have your marketing director sitting there. But we creatives, we tend to do all of that at some point until somebody trusts you enough to give you money to scale. Now, how are we supposed to really scale when we do not have those infrastructures? A lot of times you want to work with a legal person and they'll be like, oh, I cost X, Y, or Z. You barely even have the money to run your business, talk less of having extra people. So why don't people collaborate with creatives and handle these different aspects of what they do so that we can together grow and thrive and we are able to scale? So I look at it like, if we are not being intentional about how we function with creatives, we are going to take Africa's strong power, whom I think that's what we are. We are Africa's strong power, and we are going to see them beat themselves, work themselves to tiredness, just because the rest of the world is not intentional, or the rest of Africa is not intentional about supporting the creative industries. So being able to have access to finance to be able to scale means that we are working with different factors of a company to make it strong enough to be bankable or such that it can scale. So that's what I'm going to say about the challenges we have in raising money to be able to scale our businesses. That was long.
I think just to add on to that is becoming bankable, yes, but then we don't have financial products that are built for the creative industries, that are built that in a way that understands the different funding cycles. For example, in fashion, you often, if you get an order placed by a wholesale buyer, how does the money then come in? You need the cash to sort of make the product, but then the sales come quite far after. So people don't understand that, and I think there's more products now that are being built for us, but there's still such a lack of understanding of how our industries work. And I honestly don't understand why, because we're all here ready to share the information.
And I've worked for LVMH and many other few fashion brands, luxury brands. And I have to say that, these companies are all across the globe, right? And they represent their countries. Like, these fashion houses represent them, and they represent them strong. And they can represent them strong because they have capital investment, right? And when you have capital investment, it means that people see and believe in you. And there is no other continent that has so many natural resources, a strong IP, strong design. I will tell you, I've never seen tailoring like you can see on that continent, right? And when you look at the definition of luxury, it's the make, it's the materials. Innate in luxury is that people are treated well and paid well, and you can trace back. I mean, you can trace back in Africa, but it's just really frustrating to know and to see that this looking for capital is so challenging. But what it's also remarkable is that you guys have done it. You're doing it. But for everyone in this room, they shouldn't have to work that hard. They shouldn't have to work 10 times harder than anyone else, because capital is sitting around, right?
Yes.
And we are all the first to want to buy the clothes. We all are like, why can't I access your stuff? And you're like, well, it costs money, and I can't hold inventory if I don't have money. So that's sort of how that system works. So sorry, on Iona, I want to talk to you about balancing heritage and innovation. Young designers are often struggling with honoring cultural heritage while innovating to stay competitive. What practical steps can they take to strike that balance and succeed in this global market?
I think it is a tricky balance, but I think the main thing I would say is just being true to your own identity, because our identities are built around, I guess, our culture, as everything that we see in our day-to-day, our society. And so as you as an individual build a brand, if you're able to sort of stay very true in that path and know who you are and why you're doing what you love, you end up finding a way to bridge your cultural heritage and innovate, because no one else would have the same perspective as you. No one else will see your own culture, your own everyday life, the global fashion market in the same way. We all have a very sort of individual approach to it. And I think that's one thing that I've sort of learned through the brand as well, is in going through generations. The brand started with my mum, and then I've taken over. And in sort of making the different collections that we make, how we both approach fashion and how we look at these different things is very different, but everything is very sort of all very relevant as well. All the creative expression is still very relevant. So I think also another important thing is I'm quite a fan of moving away from trends. I think our market has been dictated by trends for so long, but they don't really serve much of a purpose in terms of building a sustainable brand, because then we're sort of just chasing the next collection just to get product out there, but that doesn't make any sense, actually. We need to create beautiful products that we love, that we feel are important in the world, that come from equitable and sustainable and regenerative supply chains, and really building the community as we go, the creative community. So whether that's the artisans that we're working with, or artists as well, in terms of, I mean, for us, we do a lot of batik and stuff on top of the garments. So it's really staying true to your creative passion and purpose and not getting caught up in the hype. And I think that's also, if you look at how the markets are moving right now, people are affiliated with brands because they love them. They're affiliated with them because they want to buy into the story that the brand is selling, and not just because it's what's on trend for the market. Yes, that still happens, but I do think we're moving in a different direction now.
Yeah, I would second that. For a lot of the designers that we work with, I would say that the biggest struggle is staying true to your heritage and your story. And many people don't have a story to tell that hasn't been told before, whereas in Africa, it's rich of stories. I mean, we have hundreds of years more of stories to go, like before you have to recycle a story, okay? So, and that is, again, that's a sustainable model, and it's a really good business model, actually. Kibonen. Yes. I want to talk about redefining sustainable luxury. So African fashion is increasingly being recognized on the world stage. How do you see African fashion leading the way in redefining what sustainable luxury looks like globally?
So I think African fashion, or African-led fashion, is really an epitome of sustainable luxury. And I say that also because luxury is defined in so many ways, right? For me, at this point, luxury is really having a soul. You know, it's really not about the glitz, the glamour, the smokes, the mirrors, but it's really fashion that has a soul. And what is fashion that has a soul? Fashion that affects lives positively. You know, fashion is one of those industries that damage. Fashion is one of those industries that damage the planet in such a remarkable way. But a lot of people are very adamant to that fact. But when you have fashion that produces beautiful garments but is conscious about the environment, that is number one luxury for me. When you have fashion that can produce beautiful garments, employ and empower people, that is another aspect of luxury for me. When you have fashion that tells stories of underprivileged or underrepresented people, that is what luxury is for me. And that is what African fashion has proven to do. We tell stories of our communities. We tell stories of our history. We tell stories of things that people would just not see. I, for instance, am very big on storytelling. I remember doing a collection which was inspired by the slave trade, which was who we were before the slave trade. And I remember using biodegradable fabrics because at that time there was no synthetic fabric. It was all backcloth. It was hand-woven fabric and everything. And I gave the name of that collection Bimbia. And Bimbia is the door of no return from Cameroon. And so many people did not even know that there was a door of no return in Cameroon. People think it's just in Ghana and Senegal and Benin, but there is Bimbia, which is the door of no return in Cameroon. And a lot of people were intrigued by that. And that is what when I see those things, I call that luxury, because you're talking about places and things and stories which would never be told in a different way. And that is really the power of fashion.
Absolutely, and you take me back to resources, right? Or even just the storytelling. I was working with a massive fashion brand on a partnership, and they came in and they said, oh, look at this new material we have, and it keeps the heat out, and it does this, and I said, they were all so proud. And I'm from Eritrea, Ethiopia, And I said, I think that fabric existed like a long time ago because I'm telling you, it's in my mom's closet. But like it's about who can capture the story first. And this again is why capital is imperative. Because if the designers, the creatives don't have the capital to not only invest in their businesses, but own that narrative, someone else gets to own it, right? But still, I believe it's a great time to sort of repossess that. Speaking on partnerships, what role can partnerships between established global brands and emerging African houses play in shifting perception of African creativity and also scaling visibility?
Thank you. So if we see what has happened in history where African brands have partnered with established global brands, it's been amazing. And I'll give examples, maybe like Tebe Magugu, who's partnered with a lot of French brands, and his brand is doing phenomenal. I would also give the example of Maktosa, who partnered, I think, with Missoni, and he's doing phenomenal. He sells in Soho at the moment. It's a win-win situation, and it's not like one person is benefiting from the other. They are both benefiting from each other, and it is so important that at this time, global brands, more established brands, give a kind of extend their visibility to younger brands. It's so important. I mean, it's like you are up there and you're holding the hand of the other people, of another generation. And especially for African brands, we need that support. We really do need that support. And I'm talking for people in here who represent these brands in one way or another. In every brand, there is a replica young brand that's coming. I know my direct chain. I know all the brands that I'm trying to be like, or all the brands that I could be like in the future. And I'm making conscious efforts to approach them for partnerships, for collaborations, because it's important. Just like we are getting from them, they are also getting from us, because mentorship, apprenticeship, leading, holding hands at this time in the world is so, so important. It cannot be overstated. So those things are really key. And also not just with global brands, but also partnerships with other institutions. You know, for a long time, the creatives, maybe fashion, has been looked at as an industry for a certain type of people. But imagine today, we partner with institutions, with Coca-Cola, with Afrexim Bank, with all these institutions. It does not only exchange, it uplifts the value, the brand value for these young brands. And to be honest, I would say this, I do not see established African brands yet, because I have not walked into Macy's and seen an African brand selling across America. I have not walked into Bloomingdale's or Saks or Nordstrom and seen that. So I'm still saying, and not just in the diaspora, even on the continent, we do not have those brands that are able to be across the board. So partnering with institutions gives us that leverage. An institution can hold your hand and accompany you along in establishing in these different, and they must not do it to everybody. There are some brands that can work and some would not work, but I think institutions should be very intentional about these sorts of partnerships.
I think I want to add on to that yes, it's important to partner with globally established brands, but as we ourselves are building brands that are to be global, the collaboration amongst ourselves is also very important. And that goes into the whole thing of being able to sort of leverage our strengths. So partnering, for example, we did a collaboration with a shoe brand from Nigeria, and in doing that and leveraging each other's markets as well, we are going to be able to build a strong market on the continent, and sort of market readiness increases, and understanding is also built. And I agree, the institutions are very important, but I would also like to see it happening more outside of fashion, because fashion can be, I just see our brands as more, how can we partner more in hospitality, in lifestyle, in culinary sort of expanses? How can we go beyond just the world of global fashion and go across it, looking in different textiles that we can collaborate with? So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I agree. Thank you. So what we've heard today is that women fashion leaders across Africa are innovating with heritage, sustainability, and creativity at the highest level. The opportunities are enormous, but to unlock them, we must pair creativity with capital. So the same models that have, again, proven successful, not only here, but everywhere else, it has to be combined and applied here is, again, back to capital. It's not a new model. Africa does not work on any different kind of model than we do here. And when they are, fashion brands, women-led companies are not just thriving, but succeeding and can scale their business globally. So the message is clear.
Yes,
African women entrepreneurs need investment. We need the infrastructure, the financing, and partnerships that fuel that growth. The talent is here, right? The ambition is here. And I can say, as a call to action, I pledge, whether it's not just capital, but also in terms of resources and connections and how we can help build those partnerships. Because something that's also really challenging for creatives is they understand their interests. They don't always understand the interest of the other. And when you can help them do that, they can negotiate better. So, or else what happens is really, it's a fail, right? So what we Is that like what happens at the Oscars when it's like time's up, right? You just close your mic. So anyway, that being said, we know what the needs are, but I just want to celebrate you two. You're doing great work. Continue the great work.
My biggest call to action for everyone in the audience is make it a point to buy and consume African fashion. Just check yourselves, check your wardrobes. Thank you.
And I want to add on to that, to understand the value chain and the supply chain that the pieces are coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like that point.